Hi everyone, this is January 2021 and we're still right in the middle of the pandemic and at the start of a new year. So we've just been chatting, Adam, Mike, Steve and myself about what we wanted to get out of this year and how we wanted to give as much value to the community as we can. We were flattered and delighted that so many of you attended the webinars in 2020. We're also mindful that attending webinars is a big commitment of your time and you've probably got webinars coming out of your ears. So we've seen enough to believe that this is something that we want to continue doing. And that as from February, we will continue to run live webinars with the Bulletproof team and our guest speakers. But for January, we thought we'd do something a little different. We thought that we would just bring the Bulletproof founders together and we would share some stuff around the topics of planning, which is what most of us are thinking about coming into a new year. And we're just going to do 10 minutes each. And we've decided to do this recorded this time so that you can watch it in your own time. So we're going to go around one by one and share some of our insights into how you can better develop your business in 2021 and beyond. And then we're making this video available for you all to watch in your own time. And of course, we would be delighted if you'd be kind enough to share and like the video so that we can reach as many people as we can. So we're going to start with Adam. So I'm going to pass over to Adam. He's going to share his screen and then we'll move through the rest of the guys. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Adam Carolan and I'll be talking today about wealth planning for business owners. So I think 2020 has been a really difficult year for everyone, including myself. You know, running a business, been very stressful. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is your mindset going into 2021. So I've used this for the last few years. It's been very successful with a lot of clients. It's just imagining those two circles in terms of, you know, your business finances and your personal finances. And I want you to think about how much time, energy, focus you're putting into your business versus the personal. And I have to say that all business owners are very much, you know, the business is a lot bigger circle than a smaller circle. But I just want you to have a mindset this year about practicing getting into good habits with your personal finances. So putting more energy and more time into that. I know it's difficult, but I'm going to give you some good tips to start with that today. But just having that mindset going into 2021 is going to really help you. And what I want to talk about is 4 key areas that I think as a business owner you need to address. Okay, so I'm going to talk about life planning. And what I mean by life planning, it's not a wishy-washy thing. I'm talking about having a real or building or having a really clear vision towards what you want life to look like, you know, either in the business or after the business. You know, what are the things that you really want to do with your life? And your business shouldn't hold you back. Your business should be built to create that life plan. And then we talk about financial planning. So financial planning for me and the clients that we work with is all about the structures and the actual detail of what we need to put in place, you know, whether it's an investment, whether it's an ISA, whether it's a pension, to get you from A to B. But the financial planning bit should not be done before you've actually understand where you want to go with the life plan bit. And then business planning, I think Paul's going to talk about this today, but you need to know what the business you need to build is, you know, so that's why the life plan bit is absolutely crucial, because if you're building a business that isn't aligned with your financial plan or your life plan, what are you building it for? Because you're not building it for yourself. You know, you're building it, and I see a lot of this with business owners. You're maybe building it for someone else, or it might be, you know, you're comparing your business with other businesses. Well, that's not really important. In 2021, we need to start building businesses towards our life plans, our financial plans. And then risk planning is an often underrated area. I think Mike and Steve are going to talk about this today. But when I talk about risk planning, you know, we wake up and we do 2 things because we have a lizard brain. You know, we want to know everything around us and know that everything's going to be okay. And then once we know that, we can then look at the opportunity. So my experience is you can't see the wood for the trees of the opportunity until you've addressed the areas of risk, which is, have I got issues in my business that I need to address? If something was to happen to me today, what would happen to the value of my business or my personal finances? You need to know that stuff and address it before you really focus on the good stuff. And some key questions to get you started, okay, and some key disciplines. Key disciplines. How much are you worth as a family? Net worth, excluding the business valuation. And don't judge yourself in doing this, but often a lot of the people, a lot of the clients that I deal with, all their wealth is usually tied up in the business, and that's fine. But what I need to start seeing is some shift of that wealth from the business to the personal finances. And I want you to start documenting how much you're worth personally, because it's a good discipline every quarter. Is my net worth going up? Am I getting wealthier? Am I getting happier? These are the kind of things that are important. Do you have a clear idea of what the future looks like after you've exited your business? And do you have a clear exit plan? So I think Paul's going to talk about this, but it's really important that your financial plan and your business plan is aligned, because, as I said before, what's the point if it isn't? Okay. And then risk planning at the end. Are you clear what would happen to the value of your business if something was to happen to you from a family perspective? So if you get knocked over by a bus tomorrow, what happens? Okay. Is there going to be enough income if you've got family, dependents? Are they going to have enough for the next 15, 20 years? There's really simple ways to solve that stuff. And my argument is that you need to be getting on with that in 2021. Okay. And we built, just to help you guys, a diagnostic tool and report. So this report literally takes no longer than 4 to 5 minutes. We've had a load of people and great feedback on doing it. It asks you 22 questions. It then gives you a report that basically scores you in those 4 areas. And what it's going to show is it's going to show areas that you're strong in, that maybe you don't need so much focus, but areas that you're weak in. And just to let you know that I've had financial planners who should be 100% complete this, and they're still coming out around 50 to 55% because there's some areas they're weak in. And what I'm really excited about is I've put all this in a book. So I've taken 18 months to write a book. It basically tells you about things that I've been using with clients for a number of years now successfully. It gives you all the tips, it gives you all the guidance about how to build wealth, personally as a business owner. My belief is that business owners need different financial planning to anyone else, because you've got 2 circles, which I talked about before. I'm going to talk about how to work out your number, how to plan your exit, and also how to enjoy your life. If you want a free copy of that as a Bulletproof Agency Network, feel free to email me or hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn, or just get hold of me via one of the guys. I hope you found that useful. I'm always around if you need to chat about any of these things. Thanks for having me.
Hi, it's Mike from Riskbox, and we're here to talk about the changing risks for your agency over the next year. So this is mirroring something that we are producing and publishing within our agency growth guide, which we will be launching at the end of this month. So So we're going to talk about 7 different areas that we think that an agency in the next year should look at, whether it's about how the agency grows. And so 2020 was a crazy year, with some agencies struggling and others we're seeing having amazing years. The only constant we saw was that change. 2021, we expect that will be exactly the same, and that change will be inevitable. So it's crucial that agencies are able to adapt. As they adapt, they need to ensure their risk profile reflects these alterations, and that primarily means modifying insurance cover. We've outlined in this presentation 7 key insurance areas that we suggest business owners consider as their agency changes, whether that is through them growing, which is obviously positive, or it might be looking to move to, say, greater profitability, or it might be a focus in, say, increased specialism. Either way, these are the 7 different key areas that we think that the agency owners should focus on. So when making significant business decisions, refer to this list and determine how they might affect your insurance cover. So the first one we're going to look at is assets. Now, with these different definitions we've put in the presentation, I might add these are not insurance definitions. These are just things that I've scraped off the internet to fill in some space so I don't have to put some stock images in. So don't take them as literal, and any insurance definitions, of course, would be extremely complicated and intentionally confusing, as the industry likes to do. So assets. So most people's common preconception of an agency is that of a business that operates from an office with a group of desks lined with iMacs, maybe a kitchen, some breakout rooms and so forth. But we've found over the last year that that completely shifted. And we personally at Riskbox, we dealt with so many office moves. In fact, we dealt with more office moves over the last 12 months than we ever had before. More agencies are now working remotely. Others, they're looking at things like subletting part of their premises, to make them, try and get some of their income back and so forth for space that they're not using. Some have adapted their current space for, greater social distancing. So, making sure that people can operate safely with an increased space. And whatever these changes are, these changes will undoubtedly affect your insurance. So if you're changing to, being a remote working agency, you need to make sure your equipment's covered at home or anywhere else you might take it. If you're moving to a larger office, perhaps you're going to, you've got some money to spend and you're going to put out a smarter fit out with, increased amount of kit in the premises. Well, again, that changes your insurance and you need to notify your broker. As an example, insurers may have certain requirements that need to be met to keep your insurance valid, and particularly when it comes to security. An alarm signaling system, for example, might be specified within your actual policy wording. So as a quick tip, if your expansion involves any leased equipment, it is generally cheaper to add this into your existing insurance policy and not take the cover that a leasing company might try to charge you. On that, all you would need to do is you need to notify your broker, get your equipment added into that policy, and then your broker will tell the lease company not to charge you the extortionate amounts that they might. Okay, so that's assets. Next, we're on to something which would be of interest to my Bulletproof colleague, Steve, and that is contracts. And contracts are crucial. If your agency is growing, you are most likely to be picking up larger, more interesting clients and larger and more complicated contracts. Not all of these clients will agree to your terms and conditions, and often they will insist on their own bespoke contracts. Now, these contracts might specify certain types of mandatory insurance, for example. They might also request high limits of cover. All of these things you need to look at carefully and make sure that your insurance complies. Because the last thing an agency should have to deal with is a client using the excuse of a breach of contract due to inadequate insurance to terminate a contract, or more likely to just withhold payment. So you need to constantly review your insurance policies against what you have in place. So this is what you pay your broker for, lean on them. So as a tip, for new insurance obligations under a contract, we would always suggest that you run them past your broker. They should be able to at least look through the actual insurance clause of a contract and check what you have against what you are being asked for. And then as well, they should be able to benchmark against what an agency of that size and type should have and what the foreseeable worst case scenario should be. So if they are unreasonable obligations being imposed against you, they will be able to give you some help in pushing back and obviously saving you spend on insurance that's not necessarily needed. So number 3, financials. Now this is something of obviously one of my other colleagues from Bulletproof, Mr. Barnes, will be touching on, but financials are very, very important in making sure your insurance is valid. So change, as we know, so over the next year, change will affect the income of an agency. It might be positive, it might be negative, but either way, it will change your insurance profile. When your annual renewal date is approaching, we always suggest to prepare your financial statements for your broker as early as possible. And that will be the same any year. At the moment, with the flux in the insurance market and the world, it is even more important to do that as early as possible. because it gives time for the broker to be able to adapt and make sure that any surprises are avoided. And if there are alternatives, if you need to restructure your program to get through properly, that you have the time and your broker has the time to do that. So changes in turnover and changes in wages will impact. Accurate and timely financials are crucial to be able to plan against these things and also to effectively budget for your future insurance costs. Providing inadequate financials can lead to difficulty in getting your claims paid in the first place. And although the premium will increase as financials do, it is important to know it's rarely directly proportional. So if your turnover was to double, that does not mean your premium will double. So give your brokers the financials as early as possible so they have time to benchmark your premium and get you alternative quotes where appropriate. And as a tip, don't forget, as your financials increase, so often will the capital that you may hold at any one time. So special consideration should be given to cyber and data cover, and in particular, cybercrime cover, as that will protect your own financial assets. Okay, that's financial. So over to number 4, nearly halfway through, limits. So policies will have limits on. And for agencies that grow with increased capital and bigger contracts, there is a greater potential impact of worst case scenarios. You need to keep a watchful eye on your own policy limits. So they could be for professional indemnity, they could be for public liability, and be ready to adjust them to reflect the exposure of your business. So when you set up your agency, something like for example, a £250,000 limit on your professional indemnity might be fine. But if you've got 40 staff, you've got, a multi-million pound turnover, you've got some really big contracts, 250 grand is not going to cut it. So you need to be able to make sure you adapt and amend your limits as you go. You should run through example issues you could face and what the potential financial impact would be for your agency. That could be from a large client suing you for a breach of contract to something like a major data breach, which can be extremely expensive. It's key to regularly get advice from the experts about the insurance limits that your agency purchases. So please speak to your broker. Explain the services you are providing and who they are for. Adequate limits are particularly important for professional indemnity, cyber and data, and management liability insurance. Now, as a risk box tip, as you look after higher levels of data, the impact of a major breach increases. This would incur higher costs too, so your liability limit will need to reflect that. And also remember, the greater risk for insurers means their cover will get more expensive. So again, you need to also bear that in mind when you're looking at your budgeting. So that's number 4. Number 5, people. So, and this is obviously something that's common and will have been discussed on many different types of presentations and so forth. But as your agency changes, as it grows, the culture can shift. It can become more of a challenge to keep everybody happy. Consider how to protect yourself from these staffing issues, such as a potential employment practice claim, for example. As the economy shifts, there is a greater fear from employees about their own position. I mean, it's exacerbated with things like furlough and the redundancies that we expect to see. So, I mean, at Riskbox, we've seen an increase in spurious claims from, quite understandably, desperate employees who are looking to get hold of any additional income possible at this fraught time. We've seen multiple unfounded allegations of discrimination and actions aimed against specific directors, because if they take the action against a director, it increases the pressure on the business and the stress on the directors themselves. So, if you're an employee in that sort of position where you're struggling and you want to get the additional money, you've got nothing to lose as well, because it doesn't cost to bring an action against the company. So you need to bear that in mind, and that is why you need to have appropriate protection as your agency changes and grows. An agency should be able to legitimately make changes to their team, and providing that they follow the correct HR procedures without fear of expensive litigation. This means ensuring appropriate management liability cover should be in place. with any potential employment litigation being raised with insurers straight away. As a tip, decent employment practices liability protection can form, and usually does form, part of a decent management liability package. Protection there is normally broader than when it is part of a simple legal expenses policy. Legal expenses policies are generally cheap, and there is a reason they are cheap. So you need to bear that in mind when looking to adequately protect your people risks within the agency. Number 6, investments, the exciting stuff. So some agencies take investment to grow. When that happens, there is a new party involved. They will have expectations about the future performance of your agency. Their view needs to be considered every step of the way. If the agency fails to deliver as expected, even if it's no fault of your own, then disputes can arise through the investors. It's therefore critically important to ensure the agency has an appropriate level of management liability cover in place to protect the personal liability of the directors. As a reminder, the liability of directors is not protected by the company being a limited entity. Actions against individuals such as directors in their personal capacity is unlimited, so it is your own personal assets on the line. As a tip, investors will often insist that management liability insurance is in place before signing off on an investment. This is because they know that this insurance can respond and can ultimately pay out should a director commit a wrongful act. Okay, we're nearly there. Home straight now, geography. So agencies normally start off relatively locally focused, but they tend to be more exposed globally as they grow. This can affect many different elements of a risk and insurance program. A common milestone we see for agencies is the day they win that first overseas client. We see other agencies shifting their model and looking to utilize overseas suppliers to deliver work at a reduced cost. Sometimes we see agencies establishing satellite operations in another country. This was complicated before Brexit, but now it requires even greater attention, as we have seen firsthand. Regardless of how you'll take over the world, it is important to bear in mind that all of these scenarios come with specific contractual and legal obligations that will affect your insurance. When opening an overseas office, for example, there will often be certain types of insurance that you will be obliged to obtain in that specific country itself. Otherwise, you'll be in breach of local regulation and vulnerable to fines and sanctions. As a final tip on this one, this is easily one of the most complicated areas when it comes to your insurance. Independent expert advice should be sought without exception. So there are the 7 key tips. Whenever there is a major change to your business, and at the very least when your renewal is due, you should always seek expert advice. Communication is vital. Ensure you are working with a broker who is available as you need them, and be sure to keep in regular contact. Expertise is fundamental, so be certain your broker truly understands your industry. Otherwise, they won't know how to properly protect your agency. Our greatest tip would be to set aside around 30 minutes every renewal specifically to speak to your broker about your business, what's changed, and what's in the pipeline for next year. That way they can understand your business and they can flag up any potential impact on your future insurance to make sure that you remain protected. That is all. You are free to leave.
Hi everyone. It's never an easy thing to follow Mike Henderson. It's certainly never an easy thing to follow Adam or even proceed Paul Barnes. And as ever, my fellow colleagues at the Bulletproof Agency Network are always worried that I put too much detail into these slides, and I feel their pain. But I'm going to try and dispel a couple of myths about lawyers and give you as much value as I can in the next 9 minutes and 40 seconds around what you need to be thinking about from a legal perspective at the start of 2021. So in a similar vein to Mike, you need to be thinking about the C word. Yes, that's COVID, your people, corporate issues, what's going on in your business and how legal advice can enable that, contracts that Mike's already touched on, the B word, yes, Brexit, because everybody loves talking about that, and a little bit about regulation as well. Could talk about property, we could talk about any number of different things, but as Paul said at the start of this, we know we've only got you for a short amount of time, so we want to try and give you what we think is the most relevant to you and your business at the start of a brand new year. So the C word, you can't escape coronavirus. What we're telling people at the minute is to think global and that this is going on, but certainly act local and stay agile. You may need to make some practical changes to the way you work to comply with new legislation in terms of how you deal with each other and how you meet with the clients. You will need to be thinking about how to engage with track and trace if you need to do so, and that's if you do need to do so when you need to make them aware of an outbreak. Certainly think about data protection when you're working from home, because we're seeing lots of attempted hacks, we're seeing lots of attempted data breaches, dealing with Zoom and team calls. Employment, there is a question around whether or not you can force your staff to get vaccinated and how you'll manage any data relating to their health. We'll come on to this in contracts in a moment or two, but are you party to any agreement that you could potentially look to either suspend or cancel as a result of the pandemic? It's actually harder to do than you might think. It's certainly a good time to think about disaster and business recovery plans, cheerful lawyer stuff, obviously, and about your wills. Adam talked about that before, but it's certainly a good time to think about preserving your will for the future. And as everyone else will be talking about in their bits, think about your potential insurance and your financial exposure as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. You can't control how a pandemic spreads, but you certainly can control how you respond to it. You can mitigate its impact by a good business continuity, good disaster planning, but also think about your supply chain, think about your stakeholders. You are being given an opportunity, whether we like it or not, to plan in peacetime right now, and that's a really good use of your time. If you are a bit more quiet, think about the plans you're going to need to put in place to recover and prosper on the other side of the COVID-19 outbreak. Certainly think about your critical infrastructure, your IT systems, your information, your stock, your premises. Think about the government guidance available. There is an ISO 22301:201. That's the business continuity management. That's something to aspire to. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach to business continuity or disaster recovery, and you need to think about it every year. But thinking about the key risks along the lines that Mike was talking about before, your employees, your supply chain, your insurance cover, tax, your strategy, your operations, your customers, financial and legal. That's about as much, how can I put it, stressful news as we can give you about COVID-19, also with giving you a few pointers on where to go from here. In terms of people, well, challenging times, certainly financially and personally across any business. What can you do to get ahead of that from an employment law perspective? Sad news is you might need to review your staffing levels. You might think about whether or not it's actually viable to continue to furlough your staff when you have to pay their national insurance and pension contributions. You might want to think about viability of that role, not only now, but after the outbreak, and decide that redundancy is the better option. If that's the case, then remember that redundancy is a very technical process and it's really easy to fall into bear traps. You've got to make sure that you use fair selection criteria and a proper process. Anyone over 2 years service is going to have unfair dismissal rights and can trigger a statutory redundancy payout. As I said before, redundancies are complex, especially where the COVID outbreak affects them. They are legally risky and they should always be your last resort if possible. You may be able to change your T's and C's of employment with your staff instead and introduce some new flexibility into your arrangement or rely on what you've already got. But if you're going to do that, make sure you consult with staff because, well, if for no other reason than just general human kindness, especially if they may be subject to termination. And please do remember, if you are flexing up or down with freelancers at the moment, sign them to an agreement so that whatever they create for you belongs to you so that you can pass it to your clients if you need to. Think about corporate structure. Well, choice of structure is probably a little bit irrelevant given that all of you will have chosen your structure already. You might want to think about your incorporation in your articles because they're the bedrock of your business, set out how you can deal with people. You might want to think about a shareholders agreement if you don't already have one along the lines of a birth, a marriage or a death. They set out how you're going to deal with each other, what happens when somebody leaves, how people can invest, how you can divest of that. You might want to put a director's service agreement in place. Bear in mind that a director is an employee as well, but it's always better to safe than sorry to have something in place. If you're dealing with another business, you might want to enter into a contract or you might want to form a separate JV, joint venture agreement. We're going to talk about investors when Paul speaks to you, but when you're raising finance, do you want debt or do you want equity? Bear in mind that debt is just a loan that you need to repay and it will be secured against the assets of your business, which can make turning them into personal assets much more difficult. And if you get somebody involved on an equity investment, then that can add new perspective into what you do. But bear in mind that the due diligence process can be complex, can be driven what they want, it can be costly, and some power may be lost. And in terms of giving away equity, do you need a dragon? Do you need someone to come into your business that's going to help you run it? Do you need an outside opinion? If you're looking to sell or you're looking to acquire, think about get yourself ready for sale. Think about what you want to achieve out of any due diligence process. Think about heads of terms and sale and purchase agreements. And more importantly, know when to walk away if it looks as if it's not going the way you need it to. And if you want to keep your staff incentivized, you might want to think about share options or other incentive schemes. But perhaps the biggest issue that I want you to focus on are your contracts, because their strength and their terms are going to be, as Mike's already mentioned, one of the key assets of your business. It's very easy to be persuaded and sign it up to an MSA or any other kind of agreement that's given to you by a client just to get work, but it could be full of bear traps. It could be full of new compliance requirements. We've seen DBS checks enforced on agencies that otherwise would need to get them, obligations around bribery, data processing, modern slavery, and there are a number of different ways to put contracts in place. You can either have a separate agreement for every deal, or you could rely on what's called the framework, which is a flexible agreement where you deal with your big commercial terms in the center of that agreement itself, and then you add in things of work, call-off orders, whatever we call them, schedules at the back that deal with specific processes as to how you work with your client, how you develop products, how you deal with them, including software licenses. One of the most important clauses in a contract is its term, because the length of the contract sets out how long your income is guaranteed for. You might want to start out with an initial term of a year that rolls over into another year to give yourself some guaranteed income, but that can cause difficult conversations with clients. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have them though. Also within agreements, you need to be thinking about how you're going to plan campaign activity, how you're going to deal with development work, user acceptance testing. Think about how much input you actually want from clients and when you want them standing over your shoulder. In terms of the standard of what you do, beware of any terms such as good industry practice and applicable laws, mainly because if a project leaves you, anybody who picks it up is always going to trash your work, and it's important that you only have a guaranteed results that you can actually deliver. You will want to put obligations in place with your clients. You want them to sign off on your work promptly, work with you willingly, give you access to the right kind of information, people and services. You want to have contact reports and meetings if possible. I know it sounds like a pain, but if you've got a written record of what's discussed, then there's never any room for doubt or argument about what was agreed. If a client rejects the deliverable, how's this going to work? Is that going to mean a refund? Is that going to mean they can terminate the agreement? Are you just going to redeliver the work? How many strikes will you be willing to agree to? And are clients going to make you pay for that work to be redone by another agency potentially? Obviously, one of the most important parts of any contract are how you get paid and what your charges are. Do you want an upfront deposit? Do you want stage payments? Do you want value-based pricing, which Paul can talk about separately? What about disbursements and third-party platform fees? When are you going to charge for that and how are they going to be paid? And in terms of that payment, how long are you going to be willing to give clients to pay? Whose terms apply? Can they dispute your invoices? I'd always say they shouldn't. And should they pay the balance in the interim? More importantly, when can you down tools without being threatened with a breach of contract because you're downing tools because you haven't been paid? In terms of records and inspections, clients might want to look at your timesheets, your payment, and details of how that's going to work are going to be really important. And also compliance again, beware this term of applicable laws, because applicable laws could mean potentially anything. And you might want to reserve the right to get legal advice on anything the client asks you to do. IP ownership, of course, in any deliverable and any background IP that you bring to a project is going to be hugely important. You might want to give, or you might want to make sure that you obtain a license to use any materials that clients give you, and make sure that you only give an indemnity on any IP infringement claim that you might expose them to, as limited as possible to the actual risk. And again, in terms of what you make for the clients, do they need a license? Do they need to own it outright? They don't always need to, and you might want to retain it to productize it for other people. Claims, if you're in a dispute, who's going to take a lead? If the client is threatened with a third-party claim, what input do they want from you and how's that going to work? You might want to get confidentiality terms. You will want to get confidentiality terms in any contract with clients to replace an initial NDA. In terms of publicity, deal with this so you can set out what you can and can't use in show reels, creds, and award entries. Personnel, think about who's going to be key to the project and whether or not clients want to say or have a say if you need to replace them. Data protection, I'm going to talk about in a second or two, but if you've got an existing contract that deals with data protection, you're going to need to think about new wording to take into account the new UK GDPR and new provisions post-Brexit. Also, many clients will ask you for an indemnity for any kind of data breach, but we'd argue that that's going to be covered by insurance and it is actually not necessary now, because if there is a breach and damages are paid out, then that can be recovered from you as a processor anyway. Warranties, that's contractual promise, only ever limit that to what you can actually agree to. Limitation of liability, again, one of the most important parts of any kind of contract. Clients will try and make you responsible for pretty much any kind of liability caused by you breathing in their general direction, but think about the actual risk involved, and if you can, limit it to the value of the project, your insurance cover, or at least a multiplier. Termination sets out how and when you can get out of the contract, and a number of different ways that happens. Either you agree that a contract comes to an end, you or they are in breach, you're insolvency, or their insolvency. But again, have a managed process for getting out of an agreement if you need one. If clients ask you for exclusivity, it's fine for them to ask, but if they're barring you from working with other clients, you might want to charge them more. Force majeure, again, we talk about acts of God and COVID-19, but actually defining what an act of God and what a force majeure event is quite difficult, even with the advent of a global pandemic. And Brexit, what do you need to change in your agreements? As I've said before and elsewhere, pandemics put pressure on your commercial relationships. You might be faced with a damage claim, or you might have to make a claim your own in the event that a client wants to pause work with you. But you're going to need a relationship after that. You're going to need those clients to be able to charge them again. What if they can outspend you? Can they cancel your work? Can they cancel your deliverables in certain circumstances? Can you down tools? Can you manufacture a breach after the fact? Do you just want to be able to walk away? Can you take preemptive measures or try and really fall back on a good account management to mitigate the effects of a dispute? And again, we talk about force majeure. If you're going to try and suggest that the pandemic gives you a way out of your obligations under an agreement, wording of the clause is always the first stop, but that scope's going to vary agreement by agreement. If you refer to a pandemic as potentially being a force majeure event, then you may have better options. If you don't, you might want to try and argue something called a frustration, which is where a change in circumstances makes the performance of a contract radically difficult or impossible. But the rule is, just because a contract's become more difficult or expensive to comply with, doesn't mean that you can necessarily find a way out of it. The B word, in terms of Brexit, you might face commercial and financial issues as a result of our departure from the European Union. Exchange rates may change. You may have brand new formalities and procedures to comply with. Your contract may be flexible, it may not be. But like I said before, if a contract becomes harder to comply with, that isn't necessarily going to mean it leaves you a way out. If it's impossible to comply with, then that might be an option. Data protection, if you've got references to the GDPR in your contract, that's now going to need to change, because the GDPR, although it implies extraterritorially, it's been replaced in the UK by a new set of regulations called the UK GDPR. Basically, transfers to and from the EU of personal data are going to be protected for 6 months, or until we get an adequacy decision, but you might need to update your wording. Any kind of reference to old legislation might need to be amended to cover this new successor legislation, although we think that the impact on commercial law is going to be pretty limited. And if you've chosen UK law and jurisdiction as part of your contract, then that's probably still going to be respected, as should be the choice of English jurisdiction. It may be challenged in the long term, and certainly trying to sue somebody outside the UK might be more complex in the short term. And last but not least, everybody loves data protection law. That's a typo. The UK GDPR is now in force alongside the Data Protection Act 2018. What we're looking to do is try and agree that we're an adequate destination, we're a safe place for personal data to be sent to, and we've got a bridge arrangement in place for 6 months, which means that there's going to be no restrictions on personal data transfers during that time. Much of the new legislation is same as the old, but we may diverge away from the EU eventually. So this is a good opportunity for you to have a look at your data protection practices and have a reset. If you're already complying, then you're probably going to do so going forward. But you do need to embrace change. You do need to embrace uncertainty, because we may diverge away from the EU in the not too distant future. If you're a UK business with no contacts or customers in the EEA, there's not much we need to do. But if you're a UK business which does get personal data from anybody within the EEA, then you need to take extra steps and make sure you put contractual clauses in place to make sure that you can show that you're going to treat data safely and you can continue to operate after the bridge period ends. Also, if you're a UK business with an office or a branch or a presence in the EEA, you're going to need to comply with both the UK GDPR and the EU, and you might need to appoint an EEA representative. It's also worth bearing in mind as well that new regulations coming from the ICO shortly around direct marketing, around the use of cookies and other technologies, and online harms, which is something I'm going to talk about on another one of these webinars, hopefully sometime soon. So that is as near to 10 minutes as I can get it, and I'm going to hand over to the one and the only Paul Barnes.
Okay, so hi everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Barnes and I'm the Managing Director of MAP. And my presentation today is going to follow on very much from what Adam's been saying. I think in the same vein that many of us as business owners get caught in that hamster wheel day to day with our heads down running the business, it's really important that we look up and really assess why it is that we're doing this. So Adam talked about the importance of a personal financial plan. Within that personal financial plan, you may have a goal to exit your business at some point, and if you don't, I'd recommend that you speak to Adam and make sure that you fully understand how your business journey is feeding into your personal financial plan. Because one thing that is a fact of life and in death is that all of us will eventually exit our business anyway. It isn't a choice. In life or in death, we will exit our business, and the only question, therefore, is whether we're going to do that in an organised way or not. So what is it that we're building for? Are we directing our efforts at potentially the most valuable aim of our business, and maybe the most valuable thing that'll happen in our lives, which is ultimately to exit our business on our own terms and get what we want from our businesses? So I get a lot of clients, a lot of people coming to me talking to me about how do I increase the value of the business. But I think what's arguably more important is how do I make my business more attractive? Because the difference of selling your business for £800,000 and 1.2 million, for example, is not as great as the difference of selling the business for nothing or 800,000. And very few people actually successfully sell the business because of what we just been talking about. They don't give it enough thought. They may get a surprise offer at some point if they're lucky, but that will probably fall through if they've not done enough to prepare themselves for an exit and to be prepared for that journey if it's to come to them. So in terms of making a business more attractive and making more valuable, a recent finding of 14,000 businesses who had actually received an offer to buy the company in the last 12 months, and this might surprise you, but the average sales offer received amongst all of these businesses was 3.7 times pre-tax profit. Now, an agency would ideally be looking to get quite significantly upwards on that 3.7 times. But this was an average of all SMEs. But the point was in regards to the business owner's involvement in the business day to day. So companies where the founder knows each of their customers by first name received a multiple of 2.93 times their profit. And businesses that operate day to day independent of the owner, where they offer the owner isn't involved in the sales and can't name their customers name by name, would actually receive offers of 4.49 times, so a significant increase in the valuation based on how involved that business owner was. And I think kind of the theme of all the content today really is to start looking at your business more like an investor rather than a business owner. Business owner, we can all get very emotionally attached and passionate about running a business, which is fantastic and one of the great things that I love about entrepreneurialism. But at the end of the day, we are investors in our businesses, and it probably represents the biggest asset, as Adam will tell you, in your life. So it's important that we think about what an exit looks like as well, and how we make the business as attractive as possible. So a quick example, if we were to take two businesses, business one or business A, owner dominates the operations day to day. It's on old working practices. The plant and machinery equipment is aged and prone to breakdowns, has little social media, PR, or Google ranking. Business B, well-functioning management team, a mature business with the latest thinking for efficiencies, always invested in new machinery, regularly in the trade press, award winners, etc. This is a business that's less reliant on the individual. It's been built in a mature way. You could take the business owner out of it and it still stands up. I think one of the myths of thinking about selling businesses is that we maybe fall into the trap of thinking that someone who wants to buy our business is looking at opportunity. The reality of most people looking to buy businesses, most entrepreneurs, is, as has been covered many times today already, it's actually more about risk mitigation than it is opportunity. The perceived opportunity of buying your business is already there. They've already identified that there's opportunity to gain financially and strategically from buying your business. And now what a buyer is looking at when they start discussions with you is, how do we reduce the risk of this going wrong? We already know this is a good and profitable business, but what are all the risks we can identify? And they're going to stress test your business to see where it might fall down. So business A there on the left has got much more chance of being able to continue its success and be a successful business if it's got those ingredients in place. So I just wanted to run through a quick 10 ways to increase the value of your business. So number one, be visible. So have a good, easy to navigate website. Hopefully, most of you being in the industry that you're in have got that. But it's the couple of shoes story, I guess, and make sure that you're regularly reviewing that and stress testing your business as though you're an investor, looking at it from an outside perspective. What comes up when your business is Googled? What are the top search results if you've not done that for a while? What actually comes up when you Google the name of your business? Have a good social media presence as a sector guru, get some PR, issue press releases to local press, trade press, online forums, commenting on posts in your industry websites, and list your business in directories. Again, this is about showing that you're a real business. You're not just a bunch of individuals. And when the individuals are taken away, that the business can continue to thrive. Otherwise, that is a huge risk for any potential buyer. Secondly, be credible. Have you got the industry accreditations that would be expected for your sector? Have you got testimonials and marketing literature? And are you in a position to be able to easily update them? Are you an active member of your trade body? Thirdly, be profitable. Have you got growing profits? Ideally with stable, with increasing margins, but at least stable margins. Again, an investor doesn't want to be seeing a business that's up and down year on year, because that would represent risk. They would much rather see stable margins that are consistent year on year. And minimize non-essential overheads. And again, going back to Adam's point, in your life plan, in your personal financial plan, when is it you want to sell the business? Because in the 3 years running up to that target sale date, you really want to be optimizing the performance of your business. You might be growing it now, but with growth comes extra overhead, and you're probably not going to be making the margins that you could make. So at what point do you want to start optimizing the business and starting that 3-year clock towards sale? Because you'll make very different decisions to what you would in the lifetime of the business. Fourthly, be cash generative. So very different from profit. A big difference between profit and cash is how you're paid. So are you paid in full at time of order, stage payments, or deposit at order? Have you got systemized credit control procedures that are not just in somebody's head, and financial policies that are written down? Have you got a cash management plan to minimize the working capital requirement of your business? Be well organized, so both physically and digitally. Have you got an organizational chart in place, a fixed asset register, and plan for replacement or renewal of your technology? And physically, have you got, sounds silly, but tidy reception area and smart looking signage? Impressions count for an awful lot. So what's somebody's impression when they come into your business? If the office looks a mess, then there's a danger that the business could be perceived not to be being run in a tidy and orderly way as well. Any CCJs or bad credit against your business, you want to start getting those removed well in advance, and make sure that all important documents are stored safely, because that'll save you an awful lot of headache, and it will impress any potential buyer. And the other thing to say on that is you never know when the opportunity is going to come up to sell your business. So you want to be you can't be too organized too soon. Be consistent. So systems manuals for all areas of the business, from admin to sales, operations, production, price lists for your sales, authority limits for purchasing. Be forward looking. So have you got projections in place for the next few months, and then more general targets for the next few years? Have you documented future potential risks in terms of disaster recovery, managing suppliers, succession planning, and tie in key employees to ensure continuity in important roles? So an investor really is looking at a potential buyer or investor really is looking right across the business. Be well managed. Have you got a clear strategy documented and a focus on growth? Have you got less reliance on the owner of the business? Keep saying that. Structured roles and responsibilities so that people can be swapped out. People by definition are not assets. They can walk away from your business at any point. But have you got clear roles and responsibilities so that you can bring other good people in to do the work to the same level? Do you run regular board meetings to review financial and non-financial KPIs? Do you run those with an agenda and document the minutes taken from those board meetings so you can make swift and considered decision making? Be aware, consider who your buyer is going to be. So really you've got 3 options: a trade or private equity buyer. So a complete remote third party looking to buy your business. Is your exit going to be to the management team? So you're looking to sell to the employees, or is it going to be to family on death? Is it going to be passed down? And if that's your decision, and you've got enough cash to achieve your financial plan, and that's what you want to do, then you still need to plan for that. Be lean and flexible, looking for new markets and ways to innovate. Also regarding an offer might come out of the blue and be very attractive, but it might not be the right time to sell. But make sure that you are flexible in terms of being able to have those conversations and understand your number. Adam will talk a lot about knowing your number. You know, what's the number that you need to sell your business for, so that it makes it more objective if an offer is to come in, that you know what you're trying to achieve for you and your family. Have a plan in mind for eventual exit, but see what happens along the way. None of us have got a crystal ball. Things do happen out of the blue. So, you know, be open-minded and not too fixated on one route. So where to start with all this then? Speak to Adam. So I've been through this process with Adam and Zenta myself in terms of planning mine and my family's life. Adam and Zenton will always encourage you to do this in conjunction with your partner, because you're a family. And as I say, the business is an asset in your life. It is not your life, full stop. So plan out what the future looks like, all the things you want to be able to afford, and all the income and assets that you've got. And then the advice about products and protection, investments, pensions comes secondary. I have a fantastic chart that Zenton put together for me, so I understand exactly what's planned and when. It's by no means static. We update it regularly because things change, thoughts change, circumstances change. But speak to Adam about putting a life plan together first, a personal financial plan, because there's no point in having a business plan if you've not done that first. As I said before, think about who you might sell to. So start to map out your exit plan and think about whether your most likely and preferred route is trade private equity, if it's a management buyout, or it's family. And then start to look at when that 3 years needs to start ticking in and what narrative you want to build for your business for that next buyer. Then we can start to market your business. Some Map actually has a service to do this, so we know how to present your business in the best light, with the most organized and professional way, initially confidentially, so without naming the name of the business, just the nature of the business. And then if we move forward to interested parties, we'll sign an NDA, and at that point we would release the name of your business with your permission, only if you choose to. And if there's any potential buyers that you never want to sell to, then that's absolutely fine. We just exclude them from the marketing, and we never disclose your name to them. Then we'd start information sharing with the business that you, the businesses that you're interested in doing a deal with. Start negotiation and heads of term. Leave the solicitors out at this point, because that's how you control the costs for solicitors. They are worth the weight in gold at the right time. But whilst you're still in negotiations with a potential buyer, you don't want to be instructing solicitors at that stage, because there's going to be a lot of editing, and that means a lot of cost. And then when you go into the very time consuming due diligence process, there's an awful lot that any potential buyer would want to look at during that process to make sure that they're making the right decision. You'll probably renegotiate at that stage as well. And they will be putting guarantees and warranties in place to make sure that what they buy is exactly what they're expecting to buy. And at that point is when you start to instruct solicitors to start to formalise it all. So, as I said at the beginning, you might not be in this position at the moment. The idea of exiting your business, particularly if you've only been doing it a few years, might feel very alien to you. But we can still help with ideas and strategies that might allow you to move forward towards that position. It's never too early to start planning. And we have a way of doing this. We have an exit planning workshop on a one-to-one basis always. Obviously, this is very sensitive, very personal, very intimate, and this could be a good way to start your new year if you want to start laying the foundations of what your exit plan might look like. Everyone, in my mind, everyone should be thinking about exiting, and I'm sure Adam would reinforce that as well. The sale is the end point, but exit planning is for everyone, and it's about, yes, maximizing the valuation, but also increasing the attractiveness as well. And that comes from really reducing risk in your business for any future buyer. So if there's anything more I can share on this, if you'd like to just have an initial chat, you're not sure whether you're ready to start talking about exit planning or not, or any other questions, then please just drop me an email. My email address is there on the screen, paul@wearemap.co.uk, and I'll be delighted to talk to you. Okay. Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, that just about brings us to an end, guys. So thanks for joining us today. As we said, we can't wait to see you all again in person and start running real live events in the big wide world. But for now, February, we'll be back to running live webinars week commencing 22nd of Feb. Mike, is that right? So we'll announce date, time, speakers and topics very soon. So just keep an eye out on your emails for that. And we hope to see you there. But all's left from us for today is to thank you and wish you all the best for 2021. Thanks, guys.
Guys.